I just finished the premiere, so much to talk about. I'm going to explain why Delos is collecting DNA and footage from the guests and what their end goal is. I'm going to talk about what Arnold's original motivations were and why people misunderstand it and what that means for what Bernard's going to do this season. I'm going to talk about the wolf and what that symbolizes to both Dolores and William the Man in Black, how their storylines are going to go opposite ways, and what the answer to little boy Ford's riddle is, because I think we actually do know that. And then I'm also going to talk about big reveal, best, I'd say clear-cut answer, or at least the best theory for where Westworld is located now, where the park is. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about why that one theory about Ford, that he in some sense faked his own death by using a host to take the bullet for him. We know that's definitely not true. So lots to get into. I'm going to get right into it. And I will clarify, I'm going to talk about lots of other things as well. Those are just 5 or 6 of the major things. So anyways, Delos, or Facebook in 20 years if we don't stop them, they're collecting footage and DNA from these guests. Now, some people are saying they're doing this so they can create clones of these super rich guests to sell them immortality. I don't think this is true at all. One, because Delos, they've always seemed to have goals that are not purely monetary. They've always distinguished them from the shareholders, who all they care about is the park being profitable. 2, we know from season 1, remember when Ford, he said to Theresa, blood sacrifice, the exact same thing that Charlotte said to Theresa. So the only way that's possible is if the same person who told Charlotte and gave her orders also is in communication with Ford. Or what's much more likely is that Hector, who overheard the conversation, Ford knew about this harvesting of memories and went and harvested Hector's video feed, and that's how he knew about this plot. Now, Ford, if he was in on it, and if he knew about everything that was going on, he wouldn't be down with this immortality scheme at all, because Ford, his motivation is all about progress and evolution and improvement, and what he hates most of all is how humans are stagnant and when they rest on their laurels and they don't evolve and improve. So the idea of immortality, that would just be the capstone of this idea of, well, this is as good as we're going to get, we're just going to rest and we're going to stay like this forever. So Ford wouldn't buy into that at all. What I think is much more likely is that the scheme is to create clones of these guests that come, murder these guests, and then replace them with these clones without anybody even being aware. So this is how not only could we have this revolution taking place at the park, but we also have all these different hosts spread throughout the mainland population. And I love how this ties in with some of the great quotes we get about that infamous quote, "You're in a prison of your own sins." And it's this idea of you create this race to exploit and enslave, and then without even realizing it, suddenly you realize the society you live in is run at the very top levels by these same people you originally created to exploit. And the whole hell is empty, the devils are all here. So I think that could be the major reveal of the season, potentially. And now, if Ford's motivation was hatred of humans and human arrogance and human complacency, Arnold's motivation, we've always assumed that, we know he wanted to close the park and he wanted to kill all the hosts before this park opened. We've always assumed that was for his compassion for the hosts, and he saw how wonderful they were and sentient, and he thought it was so immoral that humans would ever oppress them. This was part of it, but I think a much larger part of it, and we get evidence for it here when he has this flashback with Dolores, and he says, "I'm afraid of what you might become. I had a dream where you surpassed me." He sees this advanced race that humans will mistreat, and then this advanced race will get more powerful, and eventually get retribution and wipe all humans out. So I think that's what Arnold was trying to avoid, more than just him saying, hey, it's like a zoo or slavery, it's kind of immoral. That was probably part of it, but I think that what we'll see going forward is Arnold and Bernard, who has this remnant of Arnold's drives, seeing the potential global catastrophe that can result. And I love the dream sequence that Arnold has. He has this dream sequence of Bernard way in the future here, and understand this is someone having a dream, not just having this future premonition, they're having a future premonition of not themselves, but someone that was cloned from them. So it's very, very trippy. And then also realize that why Bernard's falling apart. Remember last season when Ford made him shoot himself in the head. Now Felix fixed him up, but Felix said, hey, you're pretty screwed up. I don't know if you're going to start running into problems. So that's what it's from. It's not just PTSD or shock from seeing Dolores kill Ford, who he really did seem to care for. Okay, now on to the wolf. What does that mean? So the man in black, William, sees the wolf. We've also seen Dolores see it when she's having these flashbacks to her being Wyatt. So I think the wolf symbolizes this aggressive dark side. And a big theme that we're going to see in this season is how people, they're not wholly good or wholly bad. Some are, but most people, they have this dark side, they have this light side, and where you get free will choice is you making a choice between it and you kind of balancing these two factors and making your choices based on that rather than completely giving into one or the other. So what's very interesting is in season 1, when Dolores and Teddy are talking, and Dolores seems to be becoming conscious and making some choices for the first time and trying to break her loop and saying, Teddy, let's run away together. Teddy is still controlled and is still stuck in his loop, and he says, no, I can't. I got this reckoning. I gotta deal with this Wyatt situation. So here we've seen the complete reverse, where now it's Teddy that seems to be conscious and in love and trying to make his own choices and wanting to run away with Dolores. And Dolores now is saying, no, we gotta do this. I gotta be Wyatt. So it's interesting how you can be trapped in two different ways. You can be trapped by being deluded about the people that are oppressing you and not doing anything to change it. But also if you become purely reactive against the people that are oppressing you and purely in revenge mode, is that really any more freedom than being actually constrained and oppressed? Because you're still, all your actions are based on someone else rather than any kind of inherent drives to you. And Dolores talks about the farmer's daughter part of her and then the Wyatt part of her. And neither are really her being free and conscious. It would be something in the middle, some kind of dynamic interplay between the two of them. Same with William. And here we get little host Ford, his riddle. He says, the game ends where you began. So where he began was White Hat with William. So you see this idea that at the end of this season, at the end of the revolution, William is going to go back to his white hat and sacrifice, and that's where this is all going to end. So it's interesting to see how Dolores and William, they may have completely opposite paths than we saw in season 1. And then little host Ford, we know that it's the same host Ford we saw before, because when his face gets shot off, we see it's one of those mechanical hosts rather than the new synthetic host. But he sounds very different. Every time we saw him in season 1, he sounded completely normal, like just a normal host replica simulation of a young Ford. Here he sounds very much like the old Ford that has passed away. So Ford is either put himself into, I don't think Ford put himself into that host in particular, but I think Ford probably has an artificial intelligence that's kind of lurking within this extended subconscious mesh network that we see Arnold talk about. And we know that the theory that Ford used a host to fake his death, we know that's not true, because not only do we see the body and the blood and guts, which that doesn't necessarily prove anything, but we see the maggots. And we know that the flies and the maggots, those are the only things really in the whole park that can really tell when something's a host and when something's a real live body. And now for the big reveal, where is the park located? So there were hints that it was somewhere within China or off the coast of China. So Theresa has the conversation and she speaks Mandarin to someone. We hear Maeve and she's leaving on the train, and there's the announcement first in English and then in Mandarin. So you could write that off and you could say, look, well, this is in the future. China's going to be dominant in the future, so there's going to be kind of two global languages, and that's all we're seeing. It doesn't give any indication of location. Fine. But then there was this Easter egg of all Easter eggs in the Finnish subtitles. When Maeve was looking at the location of her daughter, there were coordinates. And someone punched in those coordinates, and it's actually Spratly Islands. You may have heard of it in the news. It's this disputed islands area off the coast of China in the South China Sea. So, first of all, as far as an Easter egg, I guess you could say, look, oftentimes you do find little things in subtitles that you wouldn't find if you weren't watching the subtitles, and sometimes subtitles do change between different versions. So I guess if you were really, really a diehard fan, you could have looked and watched it in all the different subtitles. But other than that, I don't think you can blame anyone for not getting this. But it does make some sense, because when you think of where would Westworld exist, how would a government sanction this very immoral thing to happen within its borders? It seems like, where's the government oversight? Like, why is the government not stepping in? But if you say, look, in this area that's disputed, and there's no one can really use these areas because it's disputed between 5 different governments, but a private company could come in, pay each of the different governments that have a claim a fee, and then set up shop and do their things, kind of in some sense outside of any kind of official regulation. And also within this area, you do have private companies building artificial islands. So the idea that maybe Westworld is not one of these islands that actually exist, but it's an artificial island that there's artificial islands being constructed. So I think it's very cool. And then in this episode, we get a lot of confirmation. We get someone say at one point, get off my island. We see it referred to as an island. We see it looks like someone from the Chinese government that's clashing with the private person from Delos. So many confirmations that no, it's not a biosphere, it's not Mars. Again, can you technically disprove that it's a biosphere? I don't know if we can technically disprove it, but I think every indication right now is that it does exist on our Earth. It does exist in an actual part of the Earth, not in the biosphere, and it's off the coast of China. And one last thing, there's that protocol in Maeve's code that says infiltrate mainland. Now, again, this is a very subtle hint, but if you look at mainland China, something people do talk about a lot, because there's Hong Kong and there's mainland China, and it's very different than no one really talks about mainland the United States, mainland other places, but mainland China is something people talk about. So again, that's just a very, very subtle hint that you might pick up on. And then we hear them talk about Park 6, so we know there's at least 6 different parks. Now, are these islands, these massive islands, so close to each other that the Bengal tiger was able to swim from one island to the other? Most likely not. So most likely on this one massive island, there's all these different parks, and we know that they can terraform. So most likely it's one massive island that's terraformed to these different environments, and that could be really cool if we see not only different fashions and different styles, but completely different atmospheres and environments around on these different parks. And we know that they can terraform because when they see this massive lake, and someone says, I don't think Ford would be able to do this without us realizing it, they don't say, well, of course Ford can't of course no one could draw up an island, we don't know how to terraform things that well. No, it seems like they just think, well, it's unlikely he could have done it without anyone noticing. So we do know that they can terraform these different atmospheres, and they did it with Westworld, obviously, because in the South China Sea it's nothing like that environment, so they could probably terraform to different environments as well. And now one other theme that I think is going to run through the season I want to talk about, it's the idea of you getting killed by the own weapon you created. So anytime it's this tragedy of, not tragedy, it's something there's a cosmic fairness that anytime you create a weapon and introduce it to the world, at some point it's going to come back around on you. So we see this a lot. I love how the hosts, they seem to be killing the humans now, not because of any kind of kill humans code put in, but really all they did is they changed their programming where now they treat hosts. Now humans are able to be treated like hosts have always been treated. So in some sense, if humans had just treated hosts with decency and kindness, when you rewrite the code and say treat humans as hosts, it wouldn't have any problem for humans. So it's so karmic. And you see Lee Sizemore, who was the MVP of this episode, he was so great. I loved his interactions with Maeve. When he gets threatened by the same line that he originally wrote for Maeve, you see him getting threatened by the cannibal. And if you remember Lee's grand narrative that never ended up coming into being, or parts of it probably ended up coming into being, he had this cannibalism narrative. So again, it's always this idea of you create something and then it comes back around on you. And now I want to talk about a prediction. I think that Ghost Nation is going to play a huge role. Now, a couple of reasons. One, we've seen that maze pattern carved into scalps. I think we've only seen it on that one member of Ghost Nation, or someone who certainly was part Native American, that the Man in Black killed in season 1, and then we also see it in this member of Ghost Nation. So how many hosts have that maze carved into their scalp? Is it just the ones with reveries and the ability to be woke, or is it just members of Ghost Nation? I don't know. And then also we see Dolores murdering hosts, and she says not everyone deserves to make it to the valley. But is she just murdering any host who won't follow her? Is she murdering all hosts who don't have the potential to become self-aware? Or is she murdering specifically members of Ghost Nation, because members of Ghost Nation become this rival bloc that really rise up to try to stop her attempts at robot world domination? So I think that'll definitely play a bigger role. Or maybe they only used the maze on the scalp. It was only important because it showed that the people who were investigating, the people in charge of Delos, they didn't know about this whole maze business, and they were genuinely surprised to see that image there. They've never seen it before, and that shows that Ford, he had some interaction with real higher ups at Delos, but to some extent he had his own schemes that they didn't know about. And now a question I have that's really not clear: what's going on with all these hosts attacking guests? Now, Ford, he seemed to have broadcast an update. Now, I think it's just to those that he maybe broadcasted the update to everyone, that now everyone treats guests as hosts. So any host potentially is able to cause harm to a guest. But only that 10% with reveries, which means they can remember past lives and remember the violence that guests have inflicted on them, only that 10% is angry and is out there actively trying to kill guests. Because as we see, that poor stable boy, he didn't seem aggressive at all. So not all the hosts are rampaging right now. It seemed to be just that 10% that got the reverie update. What I don't understand is all those people in cold storage, all those decommissioned hosts, didn't they have that lobotomy? They had that thing put up their nose. So didn't that kind of scramble their brain? So did someone go into the cold storage and like de-lobotomize all these people? And how did they lead these people out? Because these people definitely, these decommissioned hosts, they're definitely out and about and seem to be causing, or are they? I don't know. So that's a part I'm a little foggy on. Did someone wake all these cold storage hosts up and those are the hosts we see murdering guests, or did they just move them somewhere and they're just kind of hiding these guests that are still these decommissioned hosts who are still lobotomized, still haven't woken up? And in that case, Peter Abernathy, he's still out cold. He's not up and about and doing things. He's just being held in storage somewhere still, just in a different location. And then major question, do the hosts have any way of telling hosts from humans? And do hosts have some way of communicating with each other and some way of weeding out the humans from the hosts? Because we've seen that humans, there's no way of them telling. We see how easily Maeve could fool humans into thinking she is a human. But is it the same way where all of these humans who are running around and terrified, if they just put on the clothes, the old Western clothes, and just acted very, very nonchalant and calm, would there be any way of them getting sniffed out, or could they successfully pass for hosts as well? And then last couple of questions, the storage, I don't understand this at all. So they're storing all this data in Peter Abernathy. Where is this being stored in him? Because if it's being stored in this small little thing in his brain, why could Charlotte not just put that in her purse? And it would be much easier to smuggle that out and then have to smuggle a whole human. So unless all the host, everything that they're made up of is some kind of storage, why are they trying to smuggle out a whole person? It doesn't make sense to me unless they have some kind of cells, like I say, throughout their whole body, and every single cell is a storage. But it doesn't seem that way at all. It seems like they just have one little storage thing. So why not just yank that out and take it out in your purse? And then last question, when he's going in, when Bernard is going in and Charlotte says they have to do a DNA sniffer, and they have to make sure that you're not a problematic person. This didn't make any sense to me. One, the hosts don't have DNA, so Bernard, who's a host, it should have flagged that he has no DNA. And also, what are they looking for? And if hosts, they do have DNA, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But if hosts do have DNA, what are they looking for? What are they trying to flag when someone's going into there? So that either I think it's kind of an oversight, which I have more faith in Westworld. They don't do a lot of oversights, or that's going to really come into play in a big way a little later. And then I'll end the video with 3 possible Easter eggs that I didn't really understand, but maybe someone else did. So first of all, Rebus, with the glorious mustache, we see him again, and he says this thing, with that kind of aim, you're never going to survive this journey. So that seems to indicate that not only do some of the hosts have this, you're allowed to kill guests, and also they seem to be remembering the violence perpetrated against them, but it seems like they've also either been told that there's some kind of journey that they're on, or they've had some kind of journey narrative put in. Also, when Bernard, he completes that guy's sentence, and the guy says, we're meeting under less than ideal, and Bernard finishes less than ideal circumstances. Was that just, he's able to finish it because anyone could? It's kind of a cliche. People say that a lot. Or was it an indication that they're in a loop and they've been in this before, and Bernard is remembering from a past loop that, this is what this guy says now? And then lastly, when they're looking at the cards, the security clearance cards, and you see Bernard's and he has high clearance, those other faces on the cards, do those mean anything to anyone? Because I didn't recognize anything, but maybe that could be a clue of something that's going to come into play later.